2:42 in the morning. Semnan Province, Iran. A modified Iranian ballistic missile cleared its launch gantry and tore into the humid night air. This was not a routine exercise or a satellite launch. The weapon was fueled with a high-energy propellant and aimed on a direct bearing for the Straits of Hormuz. The question facing the American military was not where it was going. It was why their sensors could no longer see it. High above the Earth, an infrared satellite detected the massive heat plume of the ignition. The data moved at the speed of light to the North American Aerospace Defense Command. Within seconds, the alert reached the Persian Gulf. The destroyer, USS Carney, was currently positioned 60 miles off the coast of Iran. The ship was a billion-dollar fortress of electronics, designed to intercept threats exactly like this one. Inside the Combat Information Center, the blue glow of tactical consoles lit the faces of the crew. The air was cold and smelled of ozone. The sensor operator spoke first. Tactical. We have a space-based infrared launch detection. Bearing 030. Range 200 miles. The tactical action officer responded immediately, confirming. Match it with the radar. Get a track file and transition to fire control. Sir, I am trying, the operator said. I have no radar return. The sky is empty. The officer leaned over the console. Check your filters. The satellite says it is there. It is climbing through 60,000 feet. The operator shook his head. I have nothing. No skin return. No electronic emissions. The target has disappeared. 80 miles to the north, the atmosphere was different. Inside a reinforced concrete bunker, a colonel of the Revolutionary Guard stared at a telemetry screen. The missile was his creation. It was a testbed for a new type of plasma sheath technology. It was designed to make the air around the missile absorb radar waves instead of reflecting them. The colonel turned to his lead engineer. Is the guidance system holding the line? The engineer did not look up. Sir, the plasma field is stable, but we have lost the uplink. The vibration from the new engine has severed the command antenna. We cannot steer it. The colonel gripped the edge of the table. Can you trigger the self-destruct? Negative, the engineer said. The missile is blind, it is deaf, and it is moving at Mach 7. Back on the USS Carney, the tension was a physical weight. The crew knew a missile had launched. They knew it was heading their way. But their screens remained a perfect, terrifying blank. The ocean outside was calm. The radar swept the horizon with relentless precision. It found nothing. 2:48 in the morning. The tactical action officer keyed his headset. Bridge. Tactical. We have a confirmed launch, but no radar acquisition. Assume a stealth profile. I am recommending a general quarters alarm. The captain answered from the bridge. Negative. I will not wake the crew for a sensor ghost. Give me a visual or a firm track. The captain looked out the thick windows of the bridge. The moon was a sliver of white over a dark sea. Everything seemed normal. There was no fire in the sky. There was no sound but the hum of the ship's engines. The morning was still quiet. It would not stay that way. 2:51 in the morning. The Combat Information Center on the USS Carney. The room was a hive of controlled anxiety. The Aegis Combat System was the most advanced naval defense network in existence. It was designed to track hundreds of targets simultaneously, from the surface of the sea to the edge of space. But the master tactical display showed only the steady, rhythmic sweep of the radar. There was no icon. There was no warning. The tactical action officer stood behind the sensor operator. Talk to me. The satellite is still showing a thermal bloom. It is moving at 7 times the speed of sound. It should be right in front of us. The operator adjusted his headset. Sir, I am running a diagnostic on the SPY-1 radar. The system says it is functioning at 100%. We are emitting. We are receiving. But there is no return. The officer looked at the screen. Is it electronic warfare? Are they jamming the receiver? Negative, the operator said. There is no noise, no interference. It is like the radar waves are just hitting a hole in the sky. They are not coming back. The officer turned to the communications station. Get the carrier on the line. I want to know if the Hawkeye has eyes on this. If we cannot see it, maybe they can from 10,000 feet up. The communications sailor spoke into his terminal. Carrier Strike Group 2. This is Guardian 1. We have a thermal event with no radar correlation. Requesting data link from the E2 Hawkeye. The response was immediate and crackling. Guardian 1. This is the Hawkeye. We have the thermal track on satellite data, but our radar is also blind. The target is a ghost. We are seeing a heat signature with no physical body. 700 miles away, the Iranian colonel stood in the shadows of the bunker. He watched the telemetry stream. The missile was now over the middle of the Persian Gulf. It was at its peak velocity, Mach 7.2. It was a feat of engineering that should have been a triumph. Instead, it was a catastrophe. The colonel spoke to his lead scientist. The Americans are silent. They have not launched a single interceptor. Why? The scientist wiped sweat from his forehead. Because they cannot see it. The plasma sheath is too thick. It is absorbing every radar pulse they send. But Colonel, we have a problem. The guidance computer has locked up. The heat from the friction is melting the internal sensors. The colonel leaned in. Where is it going? It is on a ballistic arc, the scientist said. It is not seeking a target. It is just falling. But it is falling at 5,000 miles per hour. And it is going to pass directly over the American destroyer. Back on the USS Carney, the clock moved to 2:55 in the morning. The captain was still on the bridge. He looked at the calm water. Then he felt it. It was not a sound. It was a vibration in the floor. It was a deep, low-frequency hum that made the heavy glass windows of the bridge rattle in their frames. The captain gripped the railing. Tactical. Bridge. I have a physical vibration. What is our status? The tactical action officer's voice was tight. Sir, we still have no radar. But the satellite track just updated. It is on top of us. It is coming down. The captain looked up at the night sky. For a split second, the stars seemed to ripple. Brace for impact, the captain shouted. There was no explosion. There was only a roar that sounded like the sky was being torn in half. A wall of compressed air hit the ship, with the force of a hurricane. The USS Carney listed 5 degrees to the port side. Every sailor on the bridge was thrown to the deck. The ghost had arrived. 2:58 in the morning. The North Arabian Sea. The USS Carney was reeling. The Mach 7 shockwave had hit like a physical hammer. On the bridge, the heavy glass of the forward viewing ports was webbed with cracks. The air was filled with a fine dust from the acoustic tiles that had shaken loose from the ceiling. Sailors were picking themselves up off the deck, their ears ringing with a sharp, piercing whistle. The captain stood up, wiping a smear of blood from his forehead. His voice was a rasp. Damage control. Report. Did we take a hit? The junior officer of the deck checked his console. Negative. No impact. The hull is intact. But we just took a massive atmospheric overpressure. It was a flyover. Sir, whatever that was, it was only 30 meters above the mast. In the Combat Information Center, the scene was even more chaotic. The tactical displays were still showing a clear blue screen. There were no tracks, no warnings. The Aegis system, the most sophisticated eyes in the world, was looking right through the threat. The tactical action officer screamed to be heard over the alarms. Reboot the tracking processor. I do not care if the radar is silent. We just felt it. Every man on this ship just felt it. Give me a bearing based on the sound. The sensor operator was shaking. Bearing was 270. West. It was gone before I could even blink. The satellite is showing the heat signature moving away from us at 5,000 miles per hour. 300 miles to the east, the Iranian colonel was paralyzed. He watched the white line on his telemetry screen pass directly over the blue icon representing the American destroyer. He waited for the screen to flash red. He waited for the explosion that would signal the start of a war he was not authorized to begin. The screen stayed white. The blue icon remained. The colonel exhaled a breath he did not know he was holding. It missed. We did not hit them. The lead engineer looked at him with eyes wide with terror. Colonel, it did not miss by choice. The guidance is dead. The missile is now in a terminal descent, and based on the current trajectory, it is headed straight for the coast of Saudi Arabia. specifically the Ras Tanura oil terminal. The colonel felt a cold sweat on his neck. How long? The engineer checked the countdown. 3 minutes. We have 3 minutes before an Iranian missile hits the largest oil facility in the world, and we have no way to stop it. We cannot even warn them. Our encryption keys were changed an hour ago. Back on the USS Carney, the captain had reached the Combat Information Center. He stood behind the consoles, looking at the satellite feed. A single red dot was moving west at a terrifying speed. The captain spoke to the room. That missile just harassed a United States warship. It is an act of aggression, and it is headed for a civilian population center. I want a firing solution now. Use the satellite data if the radar will not lock. The tactical action officer looked up. Sir, the interceptors need a radar lock to fly. We cannot shoot what we cannot see. If we fire an SM-3 missile now, it will just wander the sky and self-destruct. 3:01 in the morning. The red dot on the satellite screen was crossing the median line of the Persian Gulf. It was moving into Saudi Arabian airspace. The world was less than 180 seconds away from a disaster. The captain looked at the empty radar screen. Then we follow it. Tell the fleet. Tell the Pentagon. We have an invisible intruder, and it is armed. The red dot continued its steady, relentless path. It did not swerve. It did not slow down. It was a machine of pure physics, and it was out of control. 3:04 in the morning. The National Military Command Center. The Pentagon. The basement of the Pentagon was usually a place of quiet, rhythmic efficiency. Tonight, that rhythm was broken. A red light flashed on the primary wall display. It was a flash precedence message from the Persian Gulf. The duty officer, a Navy captain, read the transcript twice before picking up the secure line to the Secretary of Defense. The captain spoke with a flat, professional tone. Sir, we have a confirmed ballistic event in the Gulf. The USS Carney was overflown by a high-speed contact at 3:01. Altitude was less than 100 feet. Velocity was Mach 7. Did they engage? Negative, the captain said. The Carney reports they could not acquire a radar lock. The contact is invisible to the Aegis system. We are tracking it via infrared satellite only. It is currently over Saudi Arabian territory. Is it a weapon? The secretary asked. It has the profile of a medium-range ballistic missile, the captain replied. But it is not behaving like one. It is staying low. It is staying fast. And we have no way to intercept it. 3:07 in the morning. Inside the White House Situation Room, the lights were coming on. The president was being briefed via a secure video link. The screen showed a map of the Middle East. A single red line stretched from the Iranian coast toward the heart of the Saudi oil fields. A general from the Joint Chiefs of Staff pointed at the display. Sir, this is an unprecedented technology. We are calling it a stealth ballistic flight. If that missile impacts Ras Tanura, the global oil supply will drop by 20% in a single second. It would be an act of war against a key ally. The president leaned forward. What are our options? We cannot shoot it down, the general said. Our systems do not see it, but we know exactly where it came from. The launch site in the Semnan Province is still hot on satellite. I am recommending an immediate retaliatory strike. We have 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and the carrier Harry S. Truman in position. We can level that facility in 10 minutes. The president looked at the clock. Prepare the strike. Get the flight crews on deck. But we do not fire until that missile hits. We need to be sure. 3:10 in the morning. The Iranian bunker. The colonel was watching a different clock. He knew the Americans would be reacting. He knew their carriers would be turning into the wind. He knew his country was minutes away from being engulfed in a firestorm. He turned to his communications officer. Have you reached the Americans? No, sir, the officer said. The Swiss embassy is not answering the emergency line. We are trying the open maritime hailing frequencies. But we are telling them we have a runaway test. They think we are trying to jam their sensors. The colonel looked at the telemetry screen. The missile was now only 90 seconds from the Saudi coast. It was still at Mach 7. The friction was so intense that the nose cone of the missile was glowing white-hot. It was a streak of lightning moving through a dark room. The colonel whispered to himself, "Turn, please, just turn." But the missile did not turn. It followed the cold, hard logic of gravity and momentum. It was a ghost with a heart of fire, and it was closing in on its target. 3:12 in the morning. The flight deck of the USS Harry S. Truman. The carrier was turning into the wind. The deck was a chaotic symphony of yellow shirts and screaming jet engines. 2 FA-18 Super Hornets were already hooked to the catapults. Their engines were at full military power, glowing blue and orange against the dark sea. This was not a training exercise. The pilots were carrying a full load of precision-guided bombs. Their mission was simple. If the Iranian missile hit its target, they were to destroy the Semnan launch facility and every supporting structure within a 500-meter radius. The admiral watched from the flag bridge. He knew the weight of the decision. If he launched these planes, there was no turning back. The admiral spoke into the command circuit. "Captain, status of the strike package." The captain replied immediately. "2 aircraft are on the Cats. 4 more are in the Chalks. We are ready to launch on your command. We are waiting for the confirmation of impact." The admiral looked at the satellite feed on the wall. The target is over Saudi territory. The window is closing. If we wait for the explosion, we lose the element of surprise. 3:15 in the morning. The Iranian Air Defense Command, Tehran. The Iranian military was now in a state of total mobilization. Their coastal radars were picking up the massive increase in American electronic activity. They saw the USS Harry S. Truman turning. They saw the carrier strike group forming a defensive perimeter. To the Iranian general in the underground command center, it looked like the beginning of an invasion. He had no idea. His own scientists had lost control of a test flight. He only saw American steel moving toward his border. The general spoke to his air defense officers. "Activate the SA-20 batteries along the coast. Warm up the radars. If any American aircraft enters our territorial waters, you are cleared to fire. Do not wait for permission from Tehran." An officer responded, "Sir, the Americans are launching a massive wave of electronic jamming. We are losing track of their surface ships." The general tightened his grip on his desk. "Then they are preparing to strike. We will not be the only ones to bleed today. Prepare the counterstrike. Ready the remaining ballistic batteries." 3:18 in the morning. The Saudi Arabian coastline. The Ghost missile was no longer invisible to the naked eye. As it descended into the thicker air of the lower atmosphere, the friction was so intense that it created a trail of ionized gas. It looked like a falling star, white and blinding, cutting a path through the night sky. On the ground at the Ras Tanura oil terminal, security guards looked up in confusion. They heard a sound like a continuous roll of thunder that shook the earth beneath their boots. Inside the Combat Information Center of the USS Carney, the crew watched the infrared satellite feed. The red dot was now directly over the massive storage tanks of the terminal. Each tank held millions of barrels of crude oil. An impact would create a fireball that would be visible from space. It would be the largest industrial disaster in human history. The tactical action officer spoke. His voice was a whisper. "Impact in 30 seconds. Target is centered on the primary terminal." The captain of the Carney stood at the center of the room. He watched the screen. He knew that in 30 seconds, the world was going to change. The captain spoke. "Tell the admiral, the red line is crossed. We are at the point of no return." The missile was now less than 5,000 feet above the ground. It was a spear of fire aimed at the heart of the global economy. 3:19 and 30 seconds in the morning. The Ras Tanura oil terminal. The sky above the coast was no longer black. It was a searing electric purple. The friction of the missile's descent had ionized the very air around it, creating a column of glowing gas miles long. On the ground, the security guards did not run. They could not move. The sound was a physical wall that flattened the desert scrub and shattered every window in the control tower. The ghost was no longer a ghost. It was a spear of sun-bright fire falling from the stars. 3:20 in the morning. The flight deck of the USS Harry S. Truman. The admiral looked at the tactical countdown. It was at 5 seconds. He did not look at his staff. He did not check the legalities one last time. He spoke into the fleet broadcast with a voice of cold iron. All units. This is Guardian Leader. Execute retribution. Launch the strike. The catapult fired with a violent hiss of steam. The first F-18 was flung into the night, its afterburners carving 2 orange tunnels through the dark. 2 seconds later, the second jet followed. Then the third. The air was thick with the smell of burnt kerosene and the thunder of outgoing power. The Americans were committed. The path to war was now a one-way street. 3, 20, and 30 seconds in the morning. The Iranian bunker. The colonel watched the satellite feed. He saw the heat signatures of the American jets leaving the carrier. He saw his own missile. It was zeroing in on the primary storage tanks. He saw the geometry of a global catastrophe unfolding on a piece of glass. The colonel turned away from the screen. The Americans have launched. Our batteries are tracking them. The cycle has begun. The lead engineer was staring at a different monitor. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely type. Colonel, wait. Look at the pitch sensor. The missile. It is not hitting. 3:21 in the morning. Above the Ras Tanura terminal. The missile was at 1,000 feet. It was falling at 5,000 miles per hour. The internal plasma sheath was failing as the air became dense. The guidance computer, melted and dying, sent one final, erratic signal to the control surfaces. Inside the Combat Information Center of the USS Carney, the tactical action officer gripped his console. His knuckles were white. He watched the altitude readout. Target altitude, 500 feet, 300 feet, 100 feet. The officer closed his eyes. He waited for the flash that would blind the satellites. He waited for the end of the world. 3:22 in the morning. Above the Ras Tanura oil terminal. The ghost did not strike the Earth. At an altitude of less than 50 feet, the physics of extreme velocity met the wall of dense coastal air. The missile did not crumple. It did not explode. Instead, the massive pressure wave building beneath the fuselage acted like a physical cushion. The weapon performed a violent, unintended aerodynamic skip. It cleared the primary storage tanks by less than 20 meters. The sonic boom was so powerful, it peeled the steel plating off the nearest containers like paper. Thousands of gallons of crude oil began to spray into the sand, but there was no spark. The missile, still traveling at 5 times the speed of sound, skipped upward, banked hard to the west, and screamed back out over the dark waters of the Arabian Sea. Inside the Combat Information Center of the USS Carney, the tactical action officer stared at the satellite feed. The red dot had passed through the target icon and was now moving away from the coast. The officer's voice was high and thin. It missed. It overshot the terminal. Target is back over water. Altitude is climbing to 5,000 feet. It is slowing down. The captain of the Carney grabbed the radio handset. Guardian Leader. This is Guardian 1. The impact did not occur. Repeat, no impact on Ras Tanura. The contact has cleared the terminal and is heading for open water. Brake. Brake. Recall the strike. Abort the mission. On the flight deck of the USS Harry S. Truman, the message reached the admiral. Just as the 5th jet was being hooked to the catapult, he looked at the screen. The red line had missed the cluster of storage tanks. It was a miracle of pure chance. The admiral spoke into the secure link to the pilots. All Raven flight. This is leader. Abort. Abort. Execute a holding pattern at waypoint Delta. Do not cross the coast. I repeat, do not enter Iranian airspace. The lead pilot of the strike package responded. Leader, Raven 1. We are 5 miles from the coast. We have a solid radar lock on the Iranian coastal batteries. They are painting us. If we turn now, we are exposed. I do not care, the admiral said. Turn around. Now. In the Iranian bunker, The colonel was watching the same miracle. The white line on his screen was moving away from the Saudi coast. The engineer was shouting, "The engine has cut out. The plasma sheath is dissipating. The radar signature should be returning to normal." The colonel did not celebrate. He looked at the secondary radar screen. The American jets. They are turning. They are not crossing the line. The lead engineer wiped his face with both hands. They saw it miss. They know it was not an attack. The colonel looked at the communications officer. "Get on the maritime frequency. Use the open channel. No codes, no secrets. Tell the Americans exactly what happened. Tell them we lost a test vehicle. Tell them we are standing down our batteries. Do it before someone loses their nerve." Back on the USS Carney, the sensor operator suddenly jumped in his seat. "Contact. I have a firm radar return. Bearing 260, range 40 miles. It is big, it is slow, and it is falling."
Executing command.
The tactical action officer stood behind him. "Is it the Ghost?" "Yes, sir," the operator said. "The plasma is gone. I have a full Aegis track file. It is a ballistic body. No propulsion. It is just a piece of hot metal now." The captain watched the screen. The red icon was falling toward the empty ocean, hundreds of miles from any shipping lanes. The captain spoke to the room. "Track it until it splashes. I want the exact coordinates. We are going to want to see what is left of that thing." The room went silent. The sound of the cooling fans was the only noise. The world had come within seconds of a firestorm, saved by a glitch in the air, and a pilot's willingness to turn away. 3:25 in the morning. The Combat Information Center on the USS Carney was thick with the scent of recycled air and the lingering tension of a near collision. The master tactical display was no longer empty. A solid yellow icon now sat on the screen. It was moving at Mach 2.5 and falling fast. The plasma sheath that had hidden the missile was gone. The radar waves were finally bouncing back. The sensor operator adjusted his headset. Tactical. Target is continuing to decelerate. Altitude is 15,000 feet. Heading is 270. It is well clear of the Saudi coast now. It is just a falling brick. The tactical action officer stood behind him. His eyes were fixed on the speed readout. Confirm. It is no longer under power. The thermal bloom on the satellite is fading. The engine is cold. 3:30 in the morning. The Iranian bunker. The colonel watched the radio operator. The man was speaking into a wideband transmitter. He was not using a secure line. He was using the open international maritime distress frequency. Anyone with a radio in the Persian Gulf could hear him. The radio operator spoke clearly. "This is Iranian Research Facility 7. To all vessels in the northern Arabian Sea. We have experienced a catastrophic technical failure of a non-weaponized test vehicle. The vehicle is currently in a terminal descent into international waters. We repeat, this was a technical failure. All Iranian defense units are returning to a standard readiness posture. We request no further escalation." The colonel leaned over the operator. "Is there a response?" "Nothing yet, sir," the operator said. "But the American carrier group has stopped its turn. They are holding position 30 miles outside our territorial line." 3:38 in the morning. The National Military Command Center. The Pentagon. The Secretary of Defense watched the playback of the flyover on the main screen. The image was from a high-resolution drone that had been patrolling the coast. It showed the white-hot streak of the missile, passing just feet above the massive oil tanks at Ras Tanura. The shockwave had visibly shaken the entire facility. It looked like a miracle that the terminal had not exploded. The secretary spoke into the speakerphone. "General, what is the status of the Iranian units?" The general responded from the other end of the line. "Sir, we are seeing a massive de-escalation on their side. Their air defense radars are going into standby mode. Their missile batteries are being covered back up. They are telling the truth. It was a test that went off the rails." The secretary rubbed his eyes. "And our strike package?" "The F-18s are holding at the waypoint," the general said. "They are awaiting final orders. If we call them back now, the Iranians will see it as a reciprocal move. We can end this right here." The secretary looked at the president, who was watching from the corner of the room. The president nodded once. "Bring them home," the secretary said, "but tell the Carney to stay on station. I want a recovery team on that impact site before the Iranians can get there. I want to know how they made a ballistic missile invisible to our radar." 3:45 in the morning, the Central Arabian Sea. The USS Carney was moving at 30 knots toward the projected splashdown point. The sky was beginning to turn a pale, dusty gray in the east. The sensor operator watched the icon on his screen reach 0 altitude. "Splash," the operator said. "Impact confirmed. Bearing 265. Range 12 miles from our current position." The captain stood on the bridge and looked out at the horizon. He could see a small plume of steam rising from the water in the distance. The ghost was gone. The ocean had claimed the mystery. The captain keyed his radio. "Damage control. Bridge. Begin a full sweep of the mast and the upper sensors. I want to know exactly what that shockwave did to our ship. We were lucky today. We might not be lucky tomorrow." The morning air was finally cool. The immediate threat had vanished into the deep. But the silence that followed was not a peaceful one. It was the silence of a mystery that was only beginning to be unraveled. 500 in the morning, the Central Arabian Sea. The sun began to bleed over the horizon, turning the water from a deep obsidian to a bruised purple. The USS Carney sat motionless on a sea that looked like polished glass. This was the cooling phase of a crisis that had nearly ignited a hemisphere. On the surface, the ocean was quiet. Beneath the hull, the sonar teams were working. The captain stood on the starboard wing of the bridge. He watched a remote-operated vehicle being lowered into the water by a crane. The machine was a yellow box of titanium and cameras. Its mission was to find the remains of the ghost. "Status of the search grid," the captain said. "The sonar team has a solid return at 600 meters. It is a large debris field. It looks like the missile broke apart on impact, but the main body is intact." In the Combat Information Center, the atmosphere had shifted from terror to a cold, academic curiosity. A team of electronic warfare specialists had been airlifted onto the ship an hour ago. They were not looking at the ocean. They were looking at the recorded data from the Aegis radar system. The lead specialist, a civilian from the Naval Research Laboratory, pointed at a frozen frame on the screen. "Look at the return signal, or rather, look at the lack of one." The radar was hitting the target. We can see the energy leaving the arrays, but it was not bouncing back. The tactical action officer leaned in. "We suspected a plasma sheath. Is that what we are seeing?" The specialist nodded. "It is more than just a theory now. When an object moves at Mach 7 in the lower atmosphere, the air around it becomes so hot it turns into a plasma. That plasma is electrically conductive. If you tune it correctly, it acts like a sponge for radar waves. The Carney did not have a malfunction. The physics of the missile simply removed it from our reality." 5:25 in the morning, the Iranian bunker. The colonel sat in his chair, staring at a blank screen. His orders were to monitor the American recovery effort, but to stay outside of 30 nautical miles. He watched the satellite feed of the USS Carney. He knew the Americans were currently pulling his life's work off the sea floor. The lead engineer sat next to him. "They are going to find the plasma generator, Colonel. They will have our entire design by noon." The colonel did not look at him. "Let them have it. It is a cursed technology. It worked too well. It made a weapon that even the creator could not control. If the Americans understand how dangerous it is, perhaps they will be less likely to build one themselves." The engineer lowered his voice. "The ministry is asking for a full report. They want to know why we did not use the self-destruct." "Tell them the truth," the colonel said. "Tell them that at Mach 7, even radio waves cannot keep up. We were blind. They were blind. The only thing that saved us was the wind over the Saudi coast." 5:45 in the morning. The remote vehicle reached the bottom. The video feed on the USS Carney showed a mangled tube of scorched carbon fiber resting on the silt. It was covered in a strange, glassy residue, the remains of the plasma field that had frozen in the instant of impact. The captain watched the screen from the bridge. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The mystery was solved, but the answer was more frightening than the ghost itself. The digital autopsy was complete. The Americans now knew why they had been blind. They also knew that the next time a missile launched from the Semnan Province, it might stay invisible all the way to the target. The immediate crisis was over. The technical arms race had just accelerated into a new, terrifying gear. 3 days later, 10:15 in the morning, Washington, District of Columbia. The conference room inside the Pentagon was windowless and shielded against electronic eavesdropping. On the mahogany table sat a single piece of charred, glassy material. It was a fragment of the leading edge from the Iranian test vehicle, recovered from the bottom of the Arabian Sea by the crew of the USS Carney. Around the table, the highest-ranking officers in the United States Navy sat in a silence that was heavy with the weight of a new reality. The Chief of Naval Operations picked up a laser pointer. He aimed it at a high-definition slide showing the radar logs from the night of the flyover. The screen was a perfect, uninterrupted blue. The Admiral spoke with a measured, professional gravity. What we are looking at is the end of an era. For 40 years, the Aegis Combat System has been the undisputed king of the horizon. We believed that if it flew, we could see it. And if we could see it, we could kill it. At 3 o'clock in the morning last Tuesday, that assumption died. He clicked to the next slide. It showed the thermal satellite track of the missile as it passed 30 meters over the mast of the destroyer. The Iranians did not intend to attack the Carney, the Admiral continued. Our intelligence confirms it was a propulsion test that suffered a command link failure, but the technical achievement is what matters. By using a controlled plasma sheath, they effectively removed a Mach 7 object from our tactical picture. If that missile had been armed with a terminal seeker, the Carney would be at the bottom of the ocean. There would have been no warning. There would have been no time to brace. An intelligence analyst leaned forward. Sir, the strategic implications are already ripple affecting through the 7th Fleet. If our primary radar can be bypassed by atmospheric ionization, every carrier strike group in the world is currently vulnerable to a first strike scenario. We are calling this the 30-meter crisis. The Admiral nodded. It is more than just a technical gap. It is a psychological one. The only reason we are not at war this morning is because a single Iranian colonel chose to use an open radio frequency, and a single American captain chose to believe him. We avoided a global conflict by a margin of seconds and a few degrees of pitch. The room remained quiet. The officers looked at the fragment of the missile. It was a small thing, no larger than a laptop, but it represented a shift in the balance of power that would take a decade to correct. The Admiral walked to the windowless wall and turned back to his staff. The history books will say that no shots were fired. They will say the crisis was resolved through professional de-escalation. But the truth is more complex. We have entered the age of the invisible threat. Modern warfare is no longer decided by who has the biggest radar. It is decided by who can see the thing that isn't there. Hours later, the sun set over the Potomac River. In the Persian Gulf, the USS Carney continued its patrol. The radar swept the horizon, its rhythmic pulse searching the empty air. The crew watched their screens with a new kind of intensity. They knew now that the sky could hold secrets that even the most advanced machines in the world could not find. The ocean was calm. The tension remained. The world had moved on, but the shadow of the ghost stayed behind. It was a reminder that in the high-stakes game of geopolitical chess, the most dangerous move is the one you never see coming.